Duster is co-created, and this first episode is co-written by J.J. Abrams. It's a long time, 6 years, since J.J. Abrams has written or directed anything. In fact, it was The Rise of Skywalker back in 2019. The Rise of Skywalker and the Star Wars trilogy in general cemented J.J. Abrams' reputation as the destroyer of franchises. Star Wars, Star Trek, the way that Lost just degenerated. He's kind of been in the creative wilderness. Duster is his big return. It's mid, with hints of girl boss. Lots of nice things here. The 70s music is very well selected. Even some of the more discordant stuff towards the end of the episode as things become darker. The set dressing, the costumes are good. I like how you get some hints of just how ugly some 1970s fashions were, but somehow it's lightweight. Somehow doesn't feel like a real world in the same way that Lost or Game of Thrones or Mad Men felt like you were in a real world. On the one hand, it wants to be like The Gentleman. It wants to be like Guy Ritchie films. And on the other hand, it wants to be hard-hitting social commentary like The Wire. And it kind of drops into this uncanny valley in between the two. It's got that sense of being made by people who've worked in TV, by people who've worked in movies, and not by people who've actually worked in real jobs. Although it's set in the crime world, on both sides of the law, there's not the sense of threat and stakes like, say, in The Sopranos. The introduction scene is cheesy at best, and the 1970s slang, right on. Sorry to blow your fro. I mean, slang is very time specific, but combined with the fact it sort of falls in between two genres, the language can sound kind of odd. So J.J. Abrams didn't create this alone. He, a white man, co-created it with a black woman. And the two leads of the show are, on the one hand, a white man and also a black woman. I wonder if fiction is related to reality here, and you've got two people who each wanted to make their own shows, and they've kind of been squashed together, and it hasn't quite worked. I'm not saying that's what happened, I'm just suggesting that that might explain the discordance between the two halves of the show. The man is Jim Ellis, played by Josh Holloway. He's a driver for the Mafia, and he's very good at it. Duster is the name of the car that Jim Ellis drives. A 1970 red Plymouth Duster. He works for Ezra Saxton, who's described as the Southwest Al Capone. He's got a daughter who doesn't know she's his daughter. This is kind of the same character that he plays in Lost. Jim Ellis gets targeted by Hayes after he causes an accident and becomes an informer for the FBI. This is the more fun and exciting half of the show. This is where the music works really well. It's kind of a corporatized version of Scorsese and Tarantino. He's a sympathetic character even when he's doing questionable things. And there's an interesting cast of people around him, both black and white. And your other lead character is Irene Hayes, played by Rachel Hilson. She's a fresh graduate of the FBI Academy who wants to go to Arizona and has personal reasons for her interest in Ezra Saxton. In the first episode, we see her first, second, and third days on the job. Now, when you're starting a new job, you might have some doubts, you might have some questions about what you're doing. You might ask the more experienced people what you actually need to do. But no, Irene Hayes shows virtually no self-doubt throughout the episode, except for one small scene where her own powers of observation are the solution to her problem. She explicitly ignores the instructions of her superiors. She immediately gets established as dominant over the Native American FBI agent, who gets portrayed as feminine and submissive. She explains how the law works to a more experienced character. She makes smug comments. She lies to her boss. And of course, all the white men in the office are implied to be racist and sexist. She gets to walk in slow motion through the office when she gets to show how girl boss she can boss and how much better she can be. So Jim Ellis and all the characters in the crime family, they're all kind of two-dimensional. They don't go too deep on the characters. But that's okay because they're interesting characters, they're kind of fun, and what they do gets soundtracked to some great music. So the Josh Holloway half of the episode, that's really interesting, but the music is also used in the FBI part of the episode, and it's less convincing here. It seems to undermine the attempts at seriousness. So like I say, It wants to be the gentleman, it wants to be Guy Ritchie, it wants to be rambunctious, and it wants to be energetic, and it also wants to be The Wire. It wants to be social commentary on sexism and racism in the late 20th century. And this kind of mishmash between them just doesn't quite go together. It feels like you've got two competing visions. The criminal side is kind of the half that's working out. I wonder whether J.J. Abrams couldn't get this greenlit by himself, and therefore he was forced to accept a co-creator. Who was the first real-life black female FBI agent? I'd be much more interested in listening to her story than I would this kind of preachy, half-assed fictionalization. So having watched a couple of episodes, I would say Duster is this weird sort of Frankenstein's monster, which is kind of fun, but perhaps also a victim of shifting cultural winds and creative compromise that's resulted in something that isn't really up to HBO's standards. Thanks for watching.